Habitat and niche examples. Habitat and niche in ecology in detail with multiple examples. In ecology, habitat and niche are two important concepts used to describe the relationships between organisms and their environments. Habitat refers to the physical environment in which an organism lives, including both abiotic and biotic factors. A habitat can be defined by its physical characteristics, such as temperature, moisture, and soil type, as well as by the presence or absence of other organisms that share the same environment. For example, a desert habitat may be characterized by high temperatures, low rainfall, and sandy soil, while a forest habitat may be characterized by moderate temperatures, high rainfall, and rich soil. Niche, on the other hand, refers to the role that an organism plays within its habitat, including its interactions with other organisms and its use of resources. The niche of an organism can be thought of as its job in the ecosystem, or the specific set of resources that it requires to survive and reproduce. For example, a herbivorous animal may have a niche that involves feeding on certain plants, while a predator may have a niche that involves hunting and killing other animals. Here are some examples to illustrate the concepts of habitat and niche. The Arctic tundra habitat and niche. The Arctic tundra is a cold and dry habitat found in the northernmost regions of the world. The niche of organisms living in this habitat is characterized by a short growing season and limited plant growth. Herbivores, such as lemmings, feed on low-lying vegetation, while carnivores, such as Arctic foxes, feed on these herbivores. The tropical rainforest habitat and niche. The tropical rainforest is a warm and wet habitat found in equatorial regions. The niche of organisms living in this habitat is characterized by a high level of competition for resources, due to the high diversity of plant and animal species. For example, toucans have a niche that involves feeding on fruit, while sloths have a niche that involves feeding on leaves. The intertidal zone habitat and niche. The intertidal zone is a habitat found along the shoreline, where the ocean meets the land. The niche of organisms living in this habitat is characterized by a constantly changing environment, as the tide goes in and out. Some organisms, such as barnacles, are adapted to living in areas that are submerged at high tide, while others, such as crabs, are adapted to living in areas that are exposed at low tide. The desert habitat and niche. The desert is a hot and dry habitat found in arid regions of the world. The niche of organisms living in this habitat is characterized by a need to conserve water and tolerate high temperatures. For example, desert plants have a niche that involves storing water in their tissues, while desert animals, such as camels, have a niche that involves conserving water by excreting concentrated urine. In conclusion, understanding the concepts of habitat and niche is important for understanding the relationships between organisms and their environments. By studying these concepts, ecologists can better understand how organisms interact with each other and with their surroundings, and how changes in the environment can affect the survival and evolution of species. Niche width and overlap in detail with multiple examples. In ecology, niche width and niche overlap are two important concepts used to describe the resource use and competition among species in a community. Niche width refers to the range of resources that a species can use and the range of environmental conditions it can tolerate. It is a measure of the breadth of a species' ecological niche. Species with a wide niche width can use a variety of resources and can tolerate a wide range of environmental conditions, while species with a narrow niche width are more specialized and have a limited range of resources and environmental conditions they can tolerate. Niche overlap, on the other hand, refers to the extent to which the ecological niches of two or more species overlap. When two or more species have similar resource requirements and environmental tolerances, they may compete for these resources, resulting in niche overlap. The degree of niche overlap can vary from complete overlap, where two or more species use exactly the same resources, to minimal overlap, where two or more species use only a few of the same resources. Here are some examples to illustrate the concepts of niche width and niche overlap. Birds in a forest habitat. In a forest habitat, different bird species may have different niche widths depending on the resources they use. For example, woodpeckers have a narrow niche width because they specialize in using dead wood for food and nesting sites, while generalist species like chickadees have a wide niche width because they can use a variety of resources such as seeds, insects, and berries. If two bird species have similar resource requirements, such as two woodpecker species, they will have high niche overlap and may compete for resources. Lizards in a desert habitat. In a desert habitat, different lizard species may have different niche widths and overlap depending on their ability to tolerate high temperatures and low water availability. For example, some lizard species may be able to tolerate higher temperatures and therefore have a wider niche width, while others may be limited to cooler microhabitats and have a narrower niche width. If two lizard species have similar temperature requirements, they will have high niche overlap and may compete for limited resources such as shade and water. Bats in a tropical rainforest habitat. In a tropical rainforest habitat, different bat species may have different niche widths and overlap depending on the resources they use for food and roosting sites. For example, fruit-eating bats have a wide niche width because they can use a variety of fruits for food, while nectar-eating bats have a narrow niche width because they specialize in using flowers for food. If two bat species have similar food requirements, they will have high niche overlap and may compete for resources. In conclusion, niche width and niche overlap are important concepts in ecology that help us understand the resource use and competition among species in a community. By studying these concepts, we can better understand how species interact with each other and with their environment, and how changes in the environment can affect the survival and evolution of species. Fundamental and realized niche in detail with multiple examples. In ecology, the concepts of fundamental and realized niches are used to describe the range of environmental conditions and resources that a species can use. Both concepts are important in understanding the ecological role of a species in a community. Fundamental niche. The fundamental niche is the range of environmental conditions and resources that a species can potentially use in the absence of competition from other species. It is the theoretical niche that a species could occupy if it had no limitations such as competition or predation. The fundamental niche is determined by the physiological and behavioral traits of a species, including its tolerance to environmental factors such as temperature, moisture, and nutrient availability. Realized niche. The realized niche is the actual range of environmental conditions and resources that a species occupies in the presence of other species and other ecological factors. It is the subset of the fundamental niche that a species actually uses. The realized niche is influenced by factors such as competition, predation, and mutualism, as well as the distribution of resources and other environmental conditions. Here are some examples to illustrate the concepts of fundamental and realized niches. Warblers in a forest habitat. In a forest habitat, different species of warblers may have different fundamental niches based on their tolerance for different environmental conditions and resources. For example, one species may be able to forage in the canopy for insects, while another may be restricted to the understory. However, the realized niche of each species is likely to be narrower due to competition with other warblers for food and space. Barnacles on intertidal rocks. In the intertidal zone, barnacles have a fundamental niche that is determined by their ability to tolerate exposure to air and waves, as well as their ability to filter feed. However, their realized niche is influenced by the distribution of other species on the rocks, such as mussels and limpets, which may compete with the barnacles for space and resources. Corals in a reef habitat. In a coral reef habitat, different species of corals have different fundamental niches based on their ability to tolerate different water temperatures and light levels. However, the realized niche of each species may be influenced by factors such as competition with other corals for space and nutrients, predation by grazers such as parrotfish, and mutualistic relationships with symbiotic algae. In conclusion, the concepts of fundamental and realized niches are important in understanding how species interact with each other and with their environment. By studying these concepts, we can better understand the factors that limit the distribution and abundance of species, as well as the ecological roles that they play in a community. Resource partitioning in detail with multiple examples. Resource partitioning is the process by which competing species use different resources or use the same resources in different ways to avoid competition and coexist in a community. This allows multiple species to share the same habitat and resources without directly competing with each other. Resource partitioning is an important mechanism of niche differentiation, and it can occur at different levels, including temporal, spatial, and trophic. Here are some examples to illustrate the concept of resource partitioning. Darwin's finches. In the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's finches are a classic example of resource partitioning. The different species of finches have different beak shapes and sizes that allow them to feed on different types of seeds and insects, which reduces competition for food resources. For example, the sharp-beaked finches feed on insects, while the ground finches have a short, thick beak that allows them to crack hard seeds. Hummingbirds. In a hummingbird community, different species of hummingbirds feed on different types of flowers or on the same flowers at different times of the day, which reduces competition for nectar. For example, some hummingbirds have long beaks that allow them to feed on deep-throated flowers, while others have short beaks that are better suited for shallow flowers. Antelope. In an African savanna, different species of antelope have different feeding habits that allow them to coexist and avoid competition. For example, the impala and the gazelle feed on different types of grasses and shrubs, which reduces competition for food. Additionally, some antelope are active during the day, while others are active at night, which reduces competition for space and resources. Anolis lizards. In a tropical forest, different species of Anolis lizards have different patterns of habitat use that allow them to coexist and avoid competition. For example, some species are arboreal and spend most of their time in trees, while others are terrestrial and spend most of their time on the ground or on low vegetation. Additionally, some species are active during the day, while others are active at night, which reduces competition for space and resources. In conclusion, resource partitioning is an important mechanism that allows multiple species to coexist in a community by reducing competition for resources. By studying the ways in which species partition resources, ecologists can better understand the factors that shape the structure and diversity of ecological communities. Resource partitioning types. Resource partitioning can occur in different ways, including temporal resource partitioning. Species may use the same resource at different times, such as feeding during different times of the day or season. This reduces competition for the resource and allows multiple species to coexist. Spatial resource partitioning. Temporal resource partitioning. Species may use the same resource at different times, such as feeding during different times of the day or season. This reduces competition for the resource and allows multiple species to coexist. Spatial resource partitioning. Species may use different parts of the same habitat or different habitats altogether, reducing competition for space and resources. For example, some bird species may use the forest canopy, while others use the understory or the forest floor. Trophic resource partitioning. Species may feed on different parts of the same resource or on different types of resources altogether. For example, some fish species may feed on plankton, while others feed on benthic organisms, reducing competition for food. Morphological resource partitioning. Species may have different physical characteristics, such as body size or beak shape, that allow them to use the same resource in different ways. For example, some bird species may have long beaks that allow them to feed on deep-throated flowers, while others have short beaks that are better suited for shallow flowers. Behavioral resource partitioning. Species may use different behaviors or strategies to exploit the same resource. For example, some bird species may use hovering or perching to feed on insects, while others may use probing or pecking. Overall, resource partitioning is an important mechanism that allows multiple species to coexist in a community by reducing competition for resources. By studying the ways in which species partition resources, ecologists can better understand the factors that shape the structure and diversity of ecological communities. Character displacement in detail types, importance in multiple examples. Character displacement is a phenomenon that occurs when species evolve different traits in response to competition for resources, such as food or habitat. When two closely related species occur in the same geographic area, they may compete for resources, which can lead to the evolution of different traits that reduce competition and allow the species to coexist. Here are some details on character displacement. Types of character displacement. Morphological character displacement. This occurs when the competing species evolve different physical traits, such as body size or shape, that allow them to use different resources. For example, two species of Galapagos finches, Geospiza fortis and Geospiza fuliginosa, have evolved different beak sizes that allow them to feed on different types of seeds. Behavioral character displacement. This occurs when the competing species evolve different behaviors that reduce competition for resources. For example, two species of damselflies, Enelagma boreal and Enelagma signatum, have evolved different mating behaviors that reduce competition for mates. Importance of character displacement. Character displacement is important because it can reduce competition between species and promote coexistence, which can increase biodiversity. By evolving different character displacement in detail types, importance in multiple examples. Character displacement is a phenomenon that occurs when species evolve different traits in response to competition for resources, such as food or habitat. When two closely related species occur in the same geographic area, they may compete for resources, which can lead to the evolution of different traits that reduce competition and allow the species to coexist. Here are some details on character displacement. Types of character displacement. Morphological character displacement. This occurs when the competing species evolve different physical traits, such as body size or shape, that allow them to use different resources. For example, two species of Galapagos finches, Geospiza fortis and Geospiza fuliginosa, have evolved different beak sizes that allow them to feed on different types of seeds. Behavioral character displacement. Behavioral character displacement. This occurs when the competing species evolve different behaviors that reduce competition for resources. For example, two species of damselflies, Enelagma boreal and Enelagma signatum, have evolved different mating behaviors that reduce competition for mates. Importance of character displacement. Character displacement is important because it can reduce competition between species and promote coexistence, which can increase biodiversity. By evolving different traits that allow them to use different resources, species can partition resources and reduce competition, which can lead to the formation of diverse ecological communities. Examples of character displacement. Galapagos finches. As mentioned earlier, two species of Galapagos finches, Geospiza fortis and Geospiza fuliginosa, have evolved different beak sizes that allow them to feed on different types of seeds. On islands where only one species occurs, the beak sizes are more similar, but on islands where both species occur, there is a greater difference in beak size, indicating that character displacement has occurred. Anolis lizards. In the Greater Antilles, several species of Anolis lizards have evolved different body sizes and limb lengths that allow them to use different parts of the habitat. On islands where two or more species occur, there is a greater difference in body size and limb length than on islands where only one species occurs, indicating that character displacement has occurred. Darwin's finches. Another example of character displacement in finches occurs on the Galapagos Islands, where two species, the medium ground finch and the large ground finch, compete for seeds. The medium ground finch has a smaller beak size and feeds on smaller seeds, while the large ground finch has a larger beak size and feeds on larger seeds. On islands where both species occur, the beak sizes are more divergent than on islands where only one species occurs, indicating that character displacement has occurred. In conclusion, character displacement is an important mechanism that allows competing species to evolve different traits that reduce competition and promote coexistence. By studying the ways in which species evolve in response to competition, ecologists can better understand the factors that shape the structure and diversity of ecological communities. Ecosystem structure and functions in detail essay. Ecosystems are complex networks of living organisms and their physical environments. Character displacement is important because it can reduce competition between species and promote coexistence, which can increase biodiversity. By evolving different traits that allow them to use different resources, species can partition resources and reduce competition, which can lead to the formation of diverse ecological communities. Examples of character displacement. Galapagos finches. As mentioned earlier, two species of Galapagos finches, Geospiza fortis and Geospiza fuliginosa, have evolved different beak sizes that allow them to feed on different types of seeds. On islands where only one species occurs, the beak sizes are more similar, but on islands where both species occur, there is a greater difference in beak size, indicating that character displacement has occurred. Anolis lizards. In the Greater Antilles, several species of Anolis lizards have evolved different body sizes and limb lengths that allow them to use different parts of the habitat. On islands where two or more species occur, there is a greater difference in body size and limb length than on islands where only one species occurs, indicating that character displacement has occurred. Darwin's finches. Another example of character displacement in finches occurs on the Galapagos Islands, where two species, the medium ground finch and the large ground finch, compete for seeds. The medium ground finch has a smaller beak size and feeds on smaller seeds, while the large ground finch has a larger beak size and feeds on larger seeds. On islands where both species occur, the beak sizes are more divergent than on islands where only one species occurs, indicating that character displacement has occurred. In conclusion, character displacement is an important mechanism that allows competing species to evolve different traits that reduce competition and promote coexistence. By studying the ways in which species evolve in response to competition, ecologists can better understand the factors that shape the structure and diversity of ecological communities. Ecosystem structure and functions in detail essay. Ecosystems are complex networks of living organisms and their physical environments. These systems are comprised of a wide variety of organisms, from microscopic bacteria to towering trees, and they perform numerous functions that are essential to the well-being of our planet. In this essay, I will discuss the structure and functions of ecosystems in detail. Ecosystem structure. Ecosystems can be divided into two main components, biotic and abiotic. The biotic component includes all living organisms within an ecosystem, including plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms. The abiotic component includes all non-living elements of the environment, such as water, air, soil, and minerals. The biotic and abiotic components interact with each other to create a functioning ecosystem. Ecosystems can also be categorized into different levels of organization, including individual organisms, populations, communities, and ecosystems. Individual organisms are the basic building blocks of ecosystems, while populations are groups of individuals of the same species that occupy the same area. Communities are comprised of multiple populations of different species that interact with each other, and ecosystems are comprised of communities in their abiotic environments. Ecosystem functions. Ecosystems perform numerous functions that are essential to life on Earth. These functions include nutrient cycling. Ecosystems cycle nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, which are essential for life. Plants absorb these nutrients from the soil, and animals obtain them by eating plants or other animals. When organisms die, their nutrients are returned to the soil and are available for uptake by plants again. Primary production. Ecosystems produce biomass through photosynthesis, which is the conversion of sunlight into organic compounds by plants. This biomass serves as a food source for other organisms and is a critical component of the global carbon cycle. Habitat provision. Ecosystems provide habitat for a wide variety of organisms, from bacteria to large mammals. These habitats provide shelter, food, and other resources that are necessary for survival. Regulation of biogeochemical cycles. Ecosystems regulate biogeochemical cycles, which are the natural processes that control the movement of elements and compounds through the environment. For example, forests play a critical role in regulating the water cycle by absorbing and releasing water. Climate regulation. Ecosystems help regulate the Earth's climate by sequestering carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releasing oxygen through photosynthesis. Additionally, ecosystems absorb solar radiation, reducing the amount of energy that is reflected back into the atmosphere. Biodiversity maintenance. Ecosystems support a high level of biodiversity, which is essential for the functioning of ecosystems and the services they provide. High biodiversity allows for greater resilience to environmental changes, such as climate change and habitat destruction. Pest regulation. Ecosystems regulate pest populations by providing natural predators and pathogens that keep pest populations in check. This helps reduce the need for chemical pesticides that can have negative impacts on the environment. Conclusion. In conclusion, ecosystems are complex networks of living and non-living components that perform numerous functions that are essential to life on Earth. These functions include nutrient cycling, primary production, habitat provision, regulation of biogeochemical cycles, climate regulation, biodiversity maintenance, and pest regulation. By studying the structure and functions of ecosystems, we can better understand the importance of these systems and the need to protect them from human activities that can have negative impacts on their functioning. Ecosystem energetics in detail. Importance with multiple examples. Ecosystem energetics is the study of how energy flows through an ecosystem. Energy enters an ecosystem as sunlight and is converted into organic matter through photosynthesis by producers such as plants and algae. This organic matter is then consumed by consumers such as herbivores and carnivores, and energy is transferred from one trophic level to another. In this essay, I will discuss the importance of ecosystem energetics and provide multiple examples. Importance of ecosystem energetics. Understanding ecosystem functioning. Ecosystem energetics helps us understand how energy flows through ecosystems and how this energy is used by different organisms. This understanding is critical for predicting how ecosystems will respond to changes in environmental conditions, such as climate change or habitat destruction. Trophic cascades. Ecosystem energetics helps us understand the importance of top predators in maintaining ecosystem balance. Trophic cascades occur when changes in one trophic level have cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. For example, the removal of top predators can lead to an increase in the abundance of herbivores, which can then lead to overgrazing and a decline in plant populations. Conservation management. Ecosystem energetics can be used to guide conservation management practices. By understanding how energy flows through an ecosystem, conservation managers can identify key species or habitats that are critical to ecosystem functioning and focus their efforts on protecting these areas. Agriculture and fisheries management. Ecosystem energetics can be used to guide agriculture and fisheries management practices. By understanding the energy flows within these systems, managers can optimize production while minimizing negative impacts on the environment. Examples of ecosystem energetics. The Serengeti ecosystem. The Serengeti ecosystem in Africa is home to a wide variety of herbivores, such as wildebeest, zebras, and gazelles, as well as predators such as lions and hyenas. Energy flows through this ecosystem from the sun to producers such as grasses and trees, which are consumed by herbivores, which are then consumed by predators. The energy transfer from one trophic level to another is critical to maintaining the balance of this ecosystem. Coral reef ecosystems. Coral reef ecosystems are some of the most diverse and productive ecosystems on the planet. Energy enters these systems through photosynthesis by algae and other producers, which are consumed by herbivorous fish, which are then consumed by carnivorous fish. The energy transfer within these ecosystems is critical to the functioning of coral reefs and the many species that depend on them. Agricultural ecosystems. Agricultural ecosystems are highly productive systems that rely on the efficient transfer of energy from one trophic level to another. Energy enters these systems through photosynthesis by crops, which are consumed by livestock, which are then consumed by humans. The efficiency of energy transfer within these systems is critical to maintaining the productivity of agriculture while minimizing negative impacts on the environment. Conclusion. In conclusion, ecosystem energetics is a critical component of ecosystem functioning. Understanding how energy flows through ecosystems is important for predicting how these systems will respond to environmental change, guiding conservation and management practices, and optimizing the productivity of agriculture and fisheries. Examples of ecosystem energetics can be seen in the Serengeti ecosystem, coral reef ecosystems, and agricultural ecosystems. Primary production in detail with multiple examples. Primary production refers to the process by which autotrophic organisms, such as plants and algae, convert inorganic molecules into organic matter using energy from sunlight through photosynthesis. Primary production is an essential component of ecosystem functioning, as it provides the base of the food chain for all heterotrophic organisms. In this essay, I will discuss primary production in detail, including its importance, factors that influence it, and multiple examples. Importance of primary production. Provides energy. Primary production provides the energy that supports all life in an ecosystem. Without primary production, heterotrophic organisms would not have a source of energy and would be unable to survive. Supports food webs. Primary production forms the base of the food chain for all heterotrophic organisms. Herbivores consume plants, and carnivores consume herbivores. The efficiency of primary production determines the amount of energy available to higher trophic levels. Regulates carbon cycle. Primary production is an essential component of the carbon cycle. During photosynthesis, autotrophs take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into organic matter. This process removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, reducing its concentration and mitigating the greenhouse effect. Factors that influence primary production. Sunlight. Sunlight is the primary source of energy for primary production. The availability of sunlight is the primary limiting factor for primary production in aquatic ecosystems, where light penetration is limited by water depth. Nutrient availability. Nutrient availability, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, can limit primary production in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. In terrestrial ecosystems, nutrient availability is influenced by soil type and weathering, while in aquatic ecosystems, nutrient availability is influenced by runoff from surrounding land. Temperature. Temperature influences primary production in both terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. In terrestrial ecosystems, higher temperatures can increase rates of photosynthesis, while in aquatic ecosystems, temperature affects nutrient availability and the rate of biological processes. Examples of primary production. Tropical rainforests. Tropical rainforests are some of the most productive ecosystems on the planet, with high rates of primary production due to the high availability of sunlight and warm temperatures. Trees in tropical rainforests are the primary producers, with epiphytes, understory plants, and vines also contributing to primary production. Coral reefs. Coral reefs are highly productive ecosystems, with primary production driven by photosynthetic organisms such as corals, algae, and seagrasses. The high productivity of coral reefs supports a diverse community of heterotrophic organisms, including fish and invertebrates. Agricultural systems. Agricultural systems rely on primary production by crops, which are the primary source of food for humans and livestock. The productivity of agricultural systems is influenced by nutrient availability, soil quality, and climate. Conclusion. In conclusion, primary production is a critical component of ecosystem functioning. It provides the energy that supports all life in an ecosystem, forms the base of the food chain, and regulates the carbon cycle. Factors that influence primary production include sunlight, nutrient availability, and temperature. Examples of primary production can be seen in tropical rainforests, coral reefs, and agricultural systems. Energy flow models in detail with explanation and multiple examples. Energy flow models are used to represent the transfer of energy through an ecosystem, from primary producers to higher trophic levels. In this model, the energy is represented as flow, with arrows indicating the direction of energy transfer. In this essay, I will discuss energy flow models in detail, including the different types of models and multiple examples. Types of energy flow models. Food chain. A food chain is a linear representation of energy transfer through an ecosystem, with each trophic level consuming the level below it. For example, a grasshopper eats grass, a frog eats the grasshopper, and a bird eats the frog. The food chain starts with primary producers and ends with top predators. Food web. A food web is a more complex representation of energy transfer through an ecosystem, where multiple food chains are interconnected. In a food web, an organism can have multiple food sources and predators, and energy can flow in multiple directions. For example, a bird may eat insects, seeds, or other birds, while insects may feed on multiple plant species. Trophic pyramid. A trophic pyramid is a representation of energy transfer in an ecosystem that shows the relative amount of energy at each trophic level. The base of the pyramid represents the primary producers, and each successive level represents a higher trophic level. The amount of energy at each level decreases as it moves up the pyramid, with top predators having the least amount of energy. Examples of energy flow models. Grassland ecosystem. In a grassland ecosystem, the energy flow model may start with grass as the primary producer. Herbivores, such as zebras, consume the grass, and predators, such as lions, consume the herbivores. The grassland ecosystem may also include scavengers and decomposers that consume dead organisms and recycle nutrients back into the soil. Coral reef ecosystem. In a coral reef ecosystem, the energy flow model may start with phytoplankton, algae, and seagrasses as the primary producers. Herbivorous fish, such as parrotfish, consume the primary producers, and predators, such as sharks, consume the herbivores. The coral reef ecosystem may also include scavengers and decomposers, such as crabs and bacteria, that break down dead organisms and recycle nutrients. Forest ecosystem. In a forest ecosystem, the energy flow model may start with trees as the primary producers. Herbivores, such as deer, consume leaves and twigs from trees, and predators, such as wolves, consume the herbivores. The forest ecosystem may also include decomposers, such as fungi and bacteria, that break down dead organic matter and recycle nutrients back into the soil. Conclusion. In conclusion, energy flow models are an important tool for understanding the transfer of energy through an ecosystem. Food chains, food webs, and trophic pyramids are different types of energy flow models that represent the relationships between trophic levels. Examples of energy flow models can be seen in grassland, coral reef, and forest ecosystems. These models help us understand the complex interactions between organisms in an ecosystem and the role of primary producers in sustaining life. Mineral cycling in detail with multiple examples and importance of each essay. Mineral cycling, also known as nutrient cycling, is the process by which essential nutrients are continuously recycled within an ecosystem. In this essay, I will discuss mineral cycling in detail, including the different types of nutrients, multiple examples of mineral cycling, and the importance of each cycle. Types of nutrients. Macronutrients. Macronutrients are nutrients that are required in large amounts by living organisms. These include carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Micronutrients. Micronutrients are nutrients that are required in smaller amounts by living organisms. These include iron, zinc, copper, manganese, boron, and molybdenum. Examples of mineral cycling. Carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is a mineral cycle that involves the movement of carbon between the atmosphere, oceans, land, and living organisms. Carbon is taken up by primary producers, such as plants, through photosynthesis, and then transferred to higher trophic levels through consumption. When living organisms die, carbon is returned to the environment through decomposition and respiration. Carbon is also released into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels and other human activities. Nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is a mineral cycle that involves the movement of nitrogen between the atmosphere, soil, and living organisms. Nitrogen gas in the atmosphere is converted into a usable form by nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which can be taken up by plants. Animals obtain nitrogen by consuming plants or other animals. When living organisms die, nitrogen is returned to the soil through decomposition, where it can be reused by plants and other organisms. Phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus cycle is a mineral cycle that involves the movement of phosphorus between the environment and living organisms. Phosphorus is often limiting in ecosystems, and is taken up by plants through their roots. Animals obtain phosphorus by consuming plants or other animals. When living organisms die, phosphorus is returned to the environment through decomposition, where it can be reused by plants and other organisms. Importance of mineral cycling. Sustaining life. Mineral cycling is essential for sustaining life on Earth. Without the cycling of nutrients, living organisms would not have access to the essential elements needed for growth and reproduction. Soil fertility. Mineral cycling is important for maintaining soil fertility. Nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are essential for plant growth, and are often limiting in soils. Mineral cycling helps to replenish these nutrients, ensuring that plants can continue to grow. Ecosystem stability. Mineral cycling is important for maintaining ecosystem stability. Nutrient imbalances can lead to changes in plant communities and can even result in the collapse of entire ecosystems. Climate regulation. Mineral cycling is important for regulating the Earth's climate. The carbon cycle, in particular, plays a key role in regulating the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. Conclusion. In conclusion, mineral cycling is a crucial process for sustaining life on Earth. The carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles are just a few examples of the many mineral cycles that occur in ecosystems. Each cycle plays an important role in maintaining soil fertility, supporting plant growth, and regulating the Earth's climate. By understanding mineral cycling, we can better appreciate the interconnectedness of all living organisms and the importance of maintaining healthy ecosystems. Trophic levels in detail. Trophic levels refer to the hierarchical levels in an ecosystem that describe the feeding relationships between organisms. Organisms at different trophic levels have different roles in the transfer of energy and nutrients within an ecosystem. In this essay, I will discuss the different trophic levels in detail. Producers, also known as autotrophs, are organisms that produce their own food through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. They are the foundation of all food chains and food webs, as they convert energy from the sun or from inorganic compounds into organic compounds. Examples of producers include plants, algae, and some bacteria. Primary consumers, also known as herbivores, are organisms that eat producers. They obtain their energy and nutrients by feeding on plants or other autotrophic organisms. Examples of primary consumers include rabbits, deer, and cows. Secondary consumers are organisms that eat primary consumers. They obtain their energy and nutrients by feeding on herbivores. Examples of secondary consumers include snakes, birds of prey, and carnivorous mammals such as wolves. Tertiary consumers are organisms that eat secondary consumers. They obtain their energy and nutrients by feeding on other carnivores. Examples of tertiary consumers include large carnivorous mammals such as lions and tigers. Quaternary consumers, also known as apex predators, are organisms at the top of the food chain. They are not typically preyed upon by other organisms in the ecosystem, and they play an important role in regulating the populations of other organisms. Examples of quaternary consumers include sharks, eagles, and crocodiles. Decomposers are organisms that break down dead organic matter, such as dead plants and animals, and recycle the nutrients back into the ecosystem. They play a crucial role in the nutrient cycling of an ecosystem. Examples of decomposers include fungi, bacteria, and some insects. It's important to note that organisms can occupy multiple trophic levels depending on their diet. For example, a bear may be a primary consumer when it eats berries and other vegetation, but may also be a secondary or tertiary consumer when it eats fish or other animals. The complexity of food webs and the interactions between organisms in an ecosystem make the concept of trophic levels a useful tool for understanding the flow of energy and nutrients within an ecosystem, but it's important to keep in mind that the real world is often more complex than our simplified models. Food chain in detail with examples and importance essay. A food chain is a hierarchical series of organisms in which each organism in the chain is eaten or otherwise consumed by the next organism in the chain. The first level of the chain consists of the primary producers, which are consumed by primary consumers, which in turn are consumed by secondary consumers, and so on. In this essay, I will discuss the importance of food chains and provide examples of different types of food chains. Importance of food chains. Food chains are important because they illustrate the flow of energy and nutrients through an ecosystem. By understanding the relationships between different organisms in a food chain, we can better understand the overall functioning of the ecosystem. Food chains also provide insight into the impact of human activities on the ecosystem. For example, deforestation or overfishing can disrupt food chains and lead to cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. Types of food chains. Grazing food chain. This type of food chain starts with producers, such as grass or other vegetation, which are consumed by herbivores, such as deer or rabbits, which are in turn consumed by carnivores, such as wolves or mountain lions. Detritus food chain. This type of food chain starts with dead organic matter, such as dead plants and animals, which are broken down by decomposers, such as fungi and bacteria. The nutrients released by decomposition are then consumed by detritivores, such as earthworms or scavengers, such as vultures. Parasitic food chain. This type of food chain involves a parasite and its host. The parasite obtains nutrients from its host, which in turn may obtain nutrients from other sources. For example, a tapeworm may live in the digestive tract of a mammal and obtain nutrients from the host's food. Aquatic food chain. This type of food chain is similar to a grazing food chain, but it takes place in aquatic ecosystems. Phytoplankton or other aquatic plants are consumed by zooplankton, which are in turn consumed by small fish, which are then consumed by larger fish, and so on. Examples of food chains. Grazing food chain, grass A, deer A, wolf. Detritus food chain, dead leaves A, fungi A, earthworms A, birds. Parasitic food chain, flea A, dog A, human. Aquatic food chain, phytoplankton A, zooplankton A, small fish A, large fish. In conclusion, food chains are an important concept in ecology because they help us understand the flow of energy and nutrients through an ecosystem. By examining the different types of food chains and their examples, we can see how different organisms are interconnected and dependent on each other in order to survive. Understanding food chains is crucial to managing and conserving our natural resources for future generations. Food web in detail with examples and importance essay. A food web is a more complex system in a food chain and shows the interactions between different organisms within an ecosystem. It is a visual representation of how energy and nutrients flow through an ecosystem, showing the interconnectivity of different species. In this essay, I will discuss the importance of food webs and provide examples of different types of food webs. Importance of food webs. Food webs are important because they provide a more comprehensive understanding of the relationships between different organisms in an ecosystem. Unlike a food chain, which only shows a linear flow of energy, a food web shows the complex interactions between different species, including those that feed on multiple types of organisms. This complexity allows for a more accurate assessment of the impacts of environmental changes or disturbances on an ecosystem. Additionally, food webs can help to identify key species that are crucial for maintaining the stability and health of the ecosystem. Types of food webs. Terrestrial food web. This type of food web includes organisms that live on land, such as plants, insects, birds, and mammals. Aquatic food web. This type of food web includes organisms that live in water, such as phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish, and marine mammals. Tundra food web. This type of food web includes organisms that live in cold and dry climates, such as lichens, mosses, reindeer, wolves, and polar bears. Examples of food webs. Terrestrial food web. Grass A, grasshopper A, frog A, snake A, hawk. Aquatic food web. Phytoplankton A, zooplankton A, small fish A, large fish A, seal tundra food web, lichens A, caribou A, arctic fox A, polar bear. In conclusion, food webs are an important concept in ecology because they provide a more accurate representation of the complex interactions between different species in an ecosystem. By examining the different types of food webs and their examples, we can see how different organisms are interconnected and dependent on each other in order to survive. Understanding food webs is crucial to managing and conserving our natural resources for future generations. Secondary production explanation in detail with multiple examples essay. Secondary production is the process by which energy is transferred from primary producers to consumers, including herbivores and carnivores, in an ecosystem. It is the rate at which biomass is produced by heterotrophic organisms, or those that obtain their energy from other organisms. In this essay, I will explain the concept of secondary production in detail, and provide multiple examples to illustrate its importance in ecosystem functioning. Explanation of secondary production. Secondary production occurs when heterotrophic organisms consume primary producers or other heterotrophs, breaking down their tissues and converting them into biomass. The rate of secondary production is influenced by several factors, including the availability of food, the efficiency of food assimilation, and the rate of respiration. In general, secondary production is lower than primary production, as only a small proportion of the energy and nutrients available in primary producers is transferred to higher trophic levels. Examples of secondary production. Grazing food chain. This is a type of food chain in which primary producers, such as grasses or algae, are consumed by herbivores, such as deer or zooplankton, which are in turn consumed by carnivores, such as wolves or sharks. In this type of food chain, secondary production is driven by the consumption of primary producers and the transfer of energy and nutrients up the trophic levels. Detritus food chain. This is a type of food chain in which dead organic matter, or detritus, is consumed by decomposers, such as bacteria or fungi, which are in turn consumed by detritivores, such as earthworms or maggots. In this type of food chain, secondary production is driven by the decomposition of organic matter and the conversion of detritus into biomass. Aquatic food webs. In aquatic ecosystems, secondary production is often driven by the availability of nutrients and the flow of energy through the food web. For example, in a freshwater system, phytoplankton may be consumed by zooplankton, which are in turn consumed by small fish, which are in turn consumed by larger fish. The rate of secondary production in this type of system is influenced by the availability of nutrients and the efficiency of energy transfer between trophic levels. In conclusion, secondary production is an important process in ecosystem functioning, as it allows for the transfer of energy and nutrients between trophic levels. Understanding the factors that influence secondary production, such as the availability of food and the efficiency of energy transfer, is crucial for managing and conserving our natural resources. By studying different types of food chains and food webs, we can gain a better understanding of the complex interactions between different organisms in an ecosystem, and develop strategies for maintaining the health and productivity of these systems. Decomposers and detritivores in detail with multiple examples and importance. Decomposers and detritivores are important components of ecosystem function, playing a crucial role in nutrient cycling and the breakdown of organic matter. In this essay, I will explain the differences between these two groups of organisms, provide multiple examples of each, and discuss their importance in ecosystem processes. Decomposers. Decomposers are organisms that break down dead organic matter, such as dead plants and animals, into simpler compounds that can be recycled back into the ecosystem. These organisms include bacteria, fungi, and some species of protists. Decomposers secrete enzymes that break down complex organic molecules into simpler forms, releasing nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon into the soil or water. Examples of decomposers include bacteria. Bacteria are the most common decomposers in most ecosystems. They break down organic matter using enzymes and use the nutrients they release for their own growth and reproduction. Fungi. Fungi are also important decomposers in many ecosystems. They secrete enzymes that break down complex organic molecules and absorb the nutrients they release. Protists. Some species of protists, such as amoebas and ciliates, are also capable of breaking down dead organic matter and releasing nutrients back into the ecosystem. Detritivores. Detritivores are organisms that feed on dead organic matter, such as leaves, wood, and animal carcasses. These organisms break down organic matter physically, using their jaws or digestive tracts to break down complex molecules into simpler forms. Detritivores play a crucial role in breaking down large pieces of organic matter that would be difficult for decomposers to break down on their own. Examples of detritivores include earthworms. Earthworms feed on decaying organic matter in soil and help to break down complex organic molecules into simpler forms. Woodlice. Woodlice are small crustaceans that feed on decaying wood and leaf litter in forests. Millipedes. Millipedes feed on dead plant material and animal carcasses, breaking them down physically and releasing nutrients back into the soil. Importance of decomposers and detritivores. Decomposers and detritivores are important for nutrient cycling in ecosystems. By breaking down dead organic matter, they release nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus back into the soil or water, making them available for uptake by plants and other organisms. They also play a role in regulating the carbon cycle by breaking down organic molecules and releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Additionally, decomposers and detritivores play a role in maintaining ecosystem health. By breaking down dead plant and animal matter, they prevent the buildup of organic matter that can lead to the growth of harmful bacteria and fungi. They also help to reduce the risk of disease transmission by breaking down carcasses and other sources of pathogens. In conclusion, decomposers and detritivores play a crucial role in ecosystem function, breaking down dead organic matter and releasing nutrients back into the ecosystem. Understanding the roles of these organisms is important for managing and conserving ecosystems, as they are critical for maintaining the health and productivity of these systems. Characteristics of a population in detail with multiple examples and importance. A population is a group of organisms of the same species that occupy the same geographical area and are capable of interbreeding. Understanding the characteristics of a population is important for studying population dynamics, assessing the health of ecosystems, and managing wildlife populations. In this essay, I will discuss the characteristics of a population in detail, provide multiple examples of each characteristic, and discuss their importance. Size. Population size is the number of individuals in a population. The size of a population can vary greatly depending on the species and the habitat they occupy. For example, the population size of a common species such as the American robin may be in the millions, while the population size of a rare species such as the black-footed ferret may be in the thousands. Population size is important for understanding the potential impact of the population on the ecosystem, as well as for management purposes, such as setting hunting or fishing quotas. Density. Population density is the number of individuals per unit area or volume. This is an important characteristic for understanding how organisms are distributed within an ecosystem. For example, a dense population of trees in a forest may have a different impact on the ecosystem than a sparsely populated one. Population density can also influence how organisms interact with one another, such as competition for resources or predation. Distribution. Population distribution refers to how individuals are spread out within a particular area. Some populations may be evenly distributed, while others may be clumped together in specific areas. This characteristic can be influenced by factors such as habitat availability, resource distribution, and social behavior. For example, prairie dogs are known for living in large, densely populated colonies, while mountain lions have a more dispersed distribution. Population distribution is important for understanding how organisms interact with their environment and with other individuals within the population. Age structure. Age structure refers to the proportion of individuals in a population at different age groups. This characteristic is important for understanding population growth and survival rates. For example, a population with a high proportion of young individuals may have a higher growth rate than one with mostly older individuals. Age structure can also be used to predict future population growth and to identify potential threats to the population, such as disease or habitat loss. Genetic variation. Genetic variation refers to the differences in DNA sequences between individuals within a population. This characteristic is important for the survival and adaptation of a population. A population with high genetic variation is more likely to be able to adapt to changing environmental conditions or to resist diseases. For example, a population of cheetahs with low genetic variation is at risk of inbreeding and genetic disorders, while a population with high genetic variation is more likely to survive and thrive. In conclusion, understanding the characteristics of a population is important for studying population dynamics, assessing ecosystem health, and managing wildlife populations. The size, density, distribution, age structure, and genetic variation of a population are all important factors that influence population growth and survival, as well as interactions with the environment and other individuals within the population. Methods of estimating population density of animals, ranging patterns through direct, indirect, and remote observations. There are several methods of estimating population density of animals, ranging from direct observation to indirect and remote observation. In this essay, I will discuss these methods in detail. Direct observation. Direct observation involves visually counting the number of individuals within a defined area. This method is commonly used for studying relatively large and conspicuous animals such as elephants, giraffes, and primates. For example, in a direct observation study of African elephants, researchers may observe the elephants in a particular area and count the number of individuals. This information can then be used to estimate the population density of elephants in that area. Indirect observation. Indirect observation involves inferring the presence of animals through the observation of their signs, such as tracks, feces, or nests. This method is commonly used for studying elusive or nocturnal animals such as tigers, leopards, and owls. For example, in a study of Bengal tigers, researchers may look for tracks or feces of tigers in a particular area. By estimating the frequency of these signs, they can then calculate the population density of tigers in that area. Remote observation. Remote observation involves using technology such as cameras, drones, or satellites to observe and count animals from a distance. This method is commonly used for studying animals in remote or inaccessible areas, as well as for studying animals that are sensitive to human presence, such as birds. For example, in a remote observation study of penguins, researchers may use satellite imagery to observe and count the number of penguin colonies in a particular area. This information can then be used to estimate the population density of penguins in that area. Ranging patterns. Ranging patterns refer to the spatial distribution of animals within their habitat. The study of ranging patterns can provide valuable information about population density and population structure. For example, in a study of gorillas, researchers may use direct observation to track the movements of individual gorillas within their habitat. By mapping the ranging patterns of individual gorillas, researchers can then estimate the population density of gorillas in that area. In conclusion, there are several methods of estimating population density of animals, ranging from direct observation to indirect and remote observation. Each method has its advantages and disadvantages, and the choice of method depends on the species being studied, the habitat, and the research question. The study of ranging patterns can also provide valuable information about population density and population structure. Sampling methods in the study of behavior in detail with multiple examples and importance. Sampling methods are used in the study of animal behavior to collect data on the behavior of individuals or groups of animals. There are several methods of sampling that are commonly used in behavioral studies, including focal animal sampling, scan sampling, and instantaneous sampling. Focal animal sampling. Focal animal sampling involves observing a single individual for a predetermined amount of time and recording all of its behaviors. This method is useful for studying the behavior of an individual animal and for collecting detailed data on a particular behavior or set of behaviors. For example, in a study of chimpanzee behavior, researchers may use focal animal sampling to observe a single chimpanzee and record all of its behaviors for a specified period of time. This information can then be used to analyze the frequency and duration of different behaviors. Scan sampling. Scan sampling involves observing a group of animals at predetermined intervals and recording the behaviors of all individuals within the group. This method is useful for studying the behavior of social animals and for collecting data on the interactions between individuals within a group. For example, in a study of meerkat behavior, researchers may use scan sampling to observe a group of meerkats and record the behaviors of all individuals within the group at 10-minute intervals. This information can then be used to analyze the social dynamics and communication patterns within the group. Instantaneous sampling. Instantaneous sampling involves observing a group of animals at predetermined intervals and recording the behaviors of a single individual at each interval. This method is useful for studying the behavior of large groups of animals and for collecting data on the prevalence of particular behaviors within the group. For example, in a study of bird behavior, researchers may use instantaneous sampling to observe a flock of birds and record the behaviors of a single bird at 1-minute intervals. This information can then be used to analyze the frequency and prevalence of different behaviors within the flock. The choice of sampling method depends on the research question and the behavior being studied. Each method has its advantages and disadvantages, and researchers may use a combination of methods to collect a comprehensive dataset. Sampling methods are important in the study of animal behavior because they allow researchers to collect data in a systematic and objective manner, which can then be used to test hypotheses and make inferences about the behavior of individuals and groups of animals. Habitat characterization in detail with multiple examples and importance. Habitat characterization is the process of describing and defining the physical, biological, and environmental features of a particular habitat. This process is important because it provides a better understanding of the habitat and its ecological significance. Habitat characterization can be done for any type of ecosystem, including terrestrial, aquatic, and marine habitats. Here are some examples of habitat characterization and their importance. Forest habitat characterization. Forest habitat characterization involves describing the physical features of the forest, including the type of trees, the density of the forest, and the presence of water sources. It also involves identifying the species of animals and plants that live in the forest, and their It also involves identifying the species of animals and plants that live in the forest and their ecological roles. This information is important for conservation efforts, as it can help identify areas of high biodiversity and prioritize conservation efforts. Wetland habitat characterization. Wetland habitat characterization involves describing the physical features of wetlands, including the type of soil, the presence of water, and the vegetation present. It also involves identifying the species of animals and plants that live in wetlands and their ecological roles. This information is important for wetland restoration efforts, as it can help identify areas that are in need of restoration and prioritize restoration efforts. Marine habitat characterization. Marine habitat characterization involves describing the physical features of marine ecosystems, including the depth of the water, the type of substrate, and the presence of currents. It also involves identifying the species of animals and plants that live in marine ecosystems and their ecological roles. This information is important for conservation efforts, as it can help identify areas of high biodiversity and prioritize conservation efforts. Urban habitat characterization. Urban habitat characterization involves describing the physical features of urban ecosystems, including the types of buildings, the presence of green spaces, and the quality of air and water. It also involves identifying the species of animals and plants that live in urban ecosystems and their ecological roles. This information is important for urban planning efforts, as it can help identify areas in need of green spaces and prioritize the creation of green spaces. In conclusion, habitat characterization is an important process that helps us better understand the physical, biological, and environmental features of different ecosystems. It provides valuable information for conservation and restoration efforts, as well as for urban planning and development. Ground and remote sensing methods in detail with multiple examples and importance. Ground and remote sensing methods are two commonly used approaches in environmental monitoring and management. Ground sensing methods involve collecting data on environmental parameters from the surface or near surface of the Earth, while remote sensing methods involve collecting data from a distance, typically using satellites or airborne sensors. Here are some examples of each approach and their importance. Ground sensing methods. Soil sampling. Soil sampling involves collecting soil samples from various locations to measure physical, chemical, and biological properties. This information is important for soil management, such as identifying nutrient deficiencies and potential contamination. Water quality monitoring. Water quality monitoring involves collecting water samples from rivers, lakes, or oceans to measure chemical and biological parameters. This information is important for ensuring that water is safe for human consumption and for the protection of aquatic ecosystems. Weather station monitoring. Weather station monitoring involves collecting data on weather parameters such as temperature, precipitation, and wind speed. This information is important for predicting weather patterns and for managing agricultural and forestry operations. Remote sensing methods. Satellite imagery. Satellite imagery involves collecting data from satellite sensors to produce images of the Earth's surface. This information can be used to monitor land use, vegetation health, and natural disasters such as wildfires and floods. LiDAR. LiDAR light detection and ranging involves emitting laser pulses from an aircraft or drone to measure the elevation and structure of the Earth's surface. This information is important for mapping terrain features and monitoring forest biomass. Radar. Radar involves emitting radio waves from an aircraft or satellite to measure the Earth's surface features. This information is important for monitoring ocean currents, ice cover, and changes in land surface due to earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. The importance of both ground and remote sensing methods lies in their ability to provide large-scale, accurate, and timely data on environmental parameters. This data is critical for environmental monitoring and management, such as identifying areas of environmental concern, tracking changes over time, and evaluating the effectiveness of management strategies. By combining ground and remote sensing methods, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the Earth's environmental systems and make more informed decisions about their management. Ground and remote sensing methods equipment's needs, procedure, applications and importance in multiple examples. Ground and remote sensing methods are used to collect data on various environmental parameters, including land use, vegetation health, water quality, weather, and topography. Here are some examples of the equipment used, procedures, applications, and importance of each approach. Ground sensing methods. Soil sampling. Soil sampling requires equipment such as a soil probe, auger, or shovel. The procedure involves collecting soil samples at regular intervals and analyzing them for physical, chemical, and biological properties. Applications include assessing soil quality for crop production, identifying soil contamination, and monitoring soil erosion. Soil sampling is important for sustainable land management practices. Water quality monitoring. Water quality monitoring requires equipment such as a water sampler, water quality meter, and laboratory equipment for analysis. The procedure involves collecting water samples from various locations and analyzing them for chemical and biological parameters. Applications include assessing the health of aquatic ecosystems, identifying sources of contamination, and monitoring water quality for human consumption. Water quality monitoring is important for protecting human health and maintaining healthy aquatic ecosystems. Weather station monitoring. Weather station monitoring requires equipment such as a thermometer, barometer, and anemometer. The procedure involves collecting data on weather parameters at regular intervals. Applications include predicting weather patterns, managing agricultural and forestry operations, and assessing the potential for natural disasters such as wildfires and hurricanes. Weather station monitoring is important for ensuring the safety and productivity of human populations and ecosystems. Remote sensing methods. Satellite imagery. Satellite imagery requires equipment such as a satellite and sensors such as cameras and spectrometers. The procedure involves collecting data on the Earth's surface from space. Applications include mapping land use and land cover, monitoring vegetation health and productivity, and assessing the impacts of natural disasters such as wildfires and floods. Satellite imagery is important for monitoring large-scale environmental changes and for informing land management decisions. LiDAR. LiDAR requires equipment such as a laser scanner mounted on an aircraft or drone. The procedure involves emitting laser pulses and measuring the time it takes for them to bounce back, which provides information on the elevation and structure of the Earth's surface. LiDAR. LiDAR requires equipment such as a laser scanner mounted on an aircraft or drone. The procedure involves emitting laser pulses and measuring the time it takes for them to bounce back, which provides information on the elevation and structure of the Earth's surface. Applications include mapping topography, monitoring forest biomass and carbon storage, and assessing the impacts of natural disasters such as landslides and earthquakes. LiDAR is important for producing high-resolution topographic maps and for informing land management decisions. Radar. Radar requires equipment such as a radar antenna mounted on an aircraft or satellite. The procedure involves emitting radio waves and measuring the time it takes for them to bounce back, which provides information on the Earth's surface features. Applications include monitoring ocean currents, ice cover, and changes in land surface due to earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Radar is important for monitoring large-scale environmental changes and for informing management decisions related to climate change and natural hazards. The importance of both ground and remote sensing methods lies in their ability to provide large-scale, accurate, and timely data on environmental parameters. This data is critical for environmental monitoring and management, such as identifying areas of environmental concern, tracking changes over time, and evaluating the effectiveness of management strategies. By combining ground and remote sensing methods, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the Earth's environmental systems and make more informed decisions about their management. Ground and remote sensing methods equipment's needs, procedure, applications and importance and multiple examples. Ground and remote sensing methods are essential techniques for studying various ecological phenomena. These methods require specialized equipment and procedures to be effective, and they have numerous applications and benefits. Ground sensing methods involve making measurements and observations directly on the ground. These methods may include transect sampling. A transect is a straight line that is used to sample an area. Transect sampling involves counting or observing organisms or features along a transect line. This method is commonly used to estimate population densities or to study changes in vegetation cover over time. Quadrat sampling. A quadrat is a small square or rectangle that is used to sample an area. Quadrat sampling involves counting or observing organisms or features within the quadrat. This method is commonly used to estimate plant populations or to study changes in soil composition. Mark recapture method. This method involves capturing and marking a sample of organisms, releasing them back into the environment, and then recapturing a second sample at a later time. By comparing the number of marked individuals in the second sample to the total number of individuals in the sample, scientists can estimate the population size. Remote sensing methods involve using technology to observe and measure features from a distance. These methods may include satellite imagery. Satellites can provide high-resolution images of the Earth's surface, allowing scientists to study large-scale changes over time, such as deforestation or changes in sea ice cover. LiDAR light detection and ranging technology uses lasers to measure distances and create detailed 3D maps of the Earth's surface. This method is commonly used to study changes in elevation or vegetation cover. Thermal imaging. Thermal imaging cameras can detect differences in temperature, which can be used to study the behavior of animals or to detect changes in vegetation or water quality. Both ground and remote sensing methods have numerous applications in ecological research, including monitoring changes in ecosystems. Ground and remote sensing methods can be used to monitor changes in ecosystems over time, including changes in vegetation cover, water quality, or animal populations. Mapping and modeling. Ground and remote sensing methods can be used to create detailed maps and models of ecosystems, allowing scientists to better understand the complex interactions between organisms and their environment. Conservation and management. Ground and remote sensing methods can be used to inform conservation and management efforts, including identifying areas of high biodiversity or monitoring the effectiveness of conservation programs. In conclusion, ground and remote sensing methods are critical tools for ecological research. These methods require specialized equipment and procedures, but they offer numerous benefits, including the ability to monitor changes in ecosystems, create detailed maps and models, and inform conservation and management efforts. Population growth curves in detail with multiple examples and importance. Population growth curves are mathematical representations of the changes in population size over time. These curves are essential for understanding how populations change over time and how factors such as resource availability, predation, and disease can impact population growth. There are two main types of population growth curves: exponential growth curves and logistic growth curves. Exponential growth curves occur when a population is growing at an accelerating rate, with each generation producing more offspring than the previous generation. The curve for exponential growth is typically a J-shaped curve, indicating rapid population growth. Examples of populations that exhibit exponential growth include bacteria and other microorganisms, as well as some invasive species in new environments. While exponential growth can be beneficial for a population in the short term, it is not sustainable in the long term due to resource limitations. Logistic growth curves occur when a population grows rapidly at first, but then reaches a carrying capacity, or maximum population size that the environment can support. The curve for logistic growth is typically an S-shaped curve, indicating that population growth initially accelerates, then levels off as carrying capacity is reached. Examples of populations that exhibit logistic growth include many plant and animal populations. Understanding the carrying capacity of an environment is essential for managing wildlife populations and other natural resources. The importance of population growth curves lies in their ability to help scientists and resource managers understand the dynamics of populations over time. By studying these curves, researchers can identify patterns in population growth and fluctuations, and make predictions about future population changes. Population growth curves also play a critical role in the management of wildlife populations and the conservation of endangered species. For example, consider the population growth curve of the gray wolf population in Yellowstone National Park. When wolves were reintroduced to the park in the 1990s, the population initially exhibited exponential growth. However, as the wolf population approached carrying capacity, growth slowed and eventually leveled off. By studying the population growth curve, wildlife managers were able to understand the carrying capacity of the park for wolves and develop management strategies to maintain a sustainable population. In conclusion, population growth curves are important tools for understanding population dynamics, resource management, and conservation efforts. By studying these curves, researchers can gain insights into how populations change over time and how environmental factors impact growth rates. Population growth curves are critical for the sustainable management of natural resources and the conservation of endangered species. Life tables in detail with multiple examples and importance. Life tables are an important tool for studying population dynamics and the life history of a species. They are statistical models that provide information on the survival and mortality rates of individuals within a population, as well as other key life history parameters such as fecundity and age at first reproduction. Life tables are typically constructed for a single cohort of individuals, with data collected over a specific time period. There are two types of life tables: static and dynamic. Static life tables are constructed using data from a single snapshot in time, while dynamic life tables are constructed using data collected over time and account for changes in population structure. Life tables are important because they provide a wealth of information about the life history of a species, including the age structure of the population, the rates of mortality and survival, and the reproductive output of individuals. By analyzing this information, researchers can gain insights into factors that affect population growth and survival, such as predation, disease, and resource availability. Here are a few examples of the importance of life tables. Conservation. Life tables can be used to assess the viability of endangered populations and to develop management strategies to ensure their survival. For example, life tables were used to assess the viability of the Florida panther population and to develop a captive breeding program to increase genetic diversity and improve survival rates. Evolutionary biology. Life tables can provide insights into the evolution of life histories and reproductive strategies. For example, studies of life tables have shown that some species have evolved to produce large numbers of offspring with low survivorship rates, while others produce fewer offspring with higher survivorship rates. Human population studies. Life tables are also used to study human populations and to develop public health policies. For example, life tables are used to estimate life expectancy and mortality rates, which can be used to develop healthcare policies and to track the impact of diseases and other health-related issues. In conclusion, life tables are an important tool for studying population dynamics and the life history of a species. They provide valuable insights into factors that affect population growth and survival, and are used in a variety of fields, including conservation biology, evolutionary biology, and public health. By analyzing data from life tables, researchers can develop management strategies to ensure the survival of endangered populations, study the evolution of life histories, and develop policies to improve human health and well-being. Life tables types in detail. There are two types of life tables, static and dynamic. Static life tables. Static life tables are constructed using data from a single snapshot in time, and are used to estimate the survival and mortality rates of a population over a specific time period. They provide a snapshot of the population structure at a particular point in time and are often used to compare different populations or to study differences in mortality and survival rates across different age groups. Static life tables are constructed by recording the number of individuals at each age class in the population and the number of individuals that die in each age class during a specific time period. The proportion of individuals that survive from one age class to the next is then calculated, along with the mortality rate for each age class. Dynamic life tables. Dynamic life tables are constructed using data collected over time and account for changes in population structure. They provide more accurate estimates of survival and mortality rates, and are often used to study population dynamics and to develop conservation strategies. Dynamic life tables are constructed by following a cohort of individuals from birth to death, recording the number of individuals at each age class and the number of individuals that died during each time interval. The survival rate is calculated by dividing the number of individuals that survive from one time interval to the next by the total number of individuals in the previous time interval. Dynamic life tables are more complex to construct than static life tables, but provide more accurate estimates of population dynamics and are better suited for studying long-term changes in population structure and mortality rates. In summary, static life tables provide a snapshot of the population structure at a particular point in time, while dynamic life tables account for changes in population structure over time. Both types of life tables are important tools for studying population dynamics and the life history of a species, and are used in a variety of fields, including conservation biology, evolutionary biology, and public health. Survivorship curves types with explanation and in detail with multiple examples and importance. Survivorship curves are graphical representations of the number of individuals surviving at each age class in a population. They are important tools for understanding the life history of a species, and for predicting the future population growth and stability. There are three types of survivorship curves: Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. Type 1 survivorship curve. Type 1 survivorship curves are characterized by high survival rates in the early and middle life stages, with a steep decline in survival rates in the later stages. This type of survivorship curve is typical of large mammals, including humans, elephants, and whales. These species typically have long lifespans, low reproductive rates, and high parental investment in offspring. Type 2 survivorship curve. Type 2 survivorship curves are characterized by relatively constant mortality rates throughout the lifespan. This type of survivorship curve is typical of birds, small mammals, and reptiles. These species typically have moderate lifespans, moderate reproductive rates, and moderate parental investment in offspring. Type 3 survivorship curve. Type 3 survivorship curves are characterized by low survival rates in the early life stages, followed by a period of high survival rates in the middle stages, and a decline in survival rates in the later stages. This type of survivorship curve is typical of insects, plants, and fish. Type 2 survivorship curve. Type 2 survivorship curves are characterized by relatively constant mortality rates throughout the lifespan. This type of survivorship curve is typical of birds, small mammals, and reptiles. These species typically have moderate lifespans, moderate reproductive rates, and moderate parental investment in offspring. Type 3 survivorship curve. Type 3 survivorship curves are characterized by low survival rates in the early life stages, followed by a period of high survival rates in the middle stages, and a decline in survival rates in the later stages. This type of survivorship curve is typical of insects, plants, and fish. These species typically have short lifespans, high reproductive rates, and low parental investment in offspring. The importance of survivorship curves lies in their ability to predict the future population growth and stability of a species. By examining the shape of the curve, it is possible to determine the age structure of the population and the potential for population growth or decline. For example, a population with a Type 1 survivorship curve is expected to have a stable or slowly growing population, while a population with a Type 3 survivorship curve is expected to have a rapidly growing population, but one that is susceptible to environmental fluctuations. Examples of survivorship curves include Type 1, humans, elephants, whales. Type 2, birds, rodents, reptiles. Type 3, insects, plants, fish. In summary, survivorship curves provide important information about the life history of a species and its potential for population growth and stability. Understanding survivorship curves is essential for conservation efforts and the management of wild populations, as it allows for the prediction of population dynamics and the identification of key factors affecting population growth and survival. Population regulation types in detail with multiple examples and importance. Population regulation refers to the mechanisms that control the growth and size of populations. These mechanisms can be intrinsic or extrinsic and can act on different levels of the population. Here are the types of population regulation. Density-dependent regulation. Density-dependent regulation occurs when population growth rates are affected by the density of individuals within a population. As population density increases, resources become more scarce, competition for resources increases, and stress-related factors like predation, disease, and parasitism become more prevalent. This results in a decrease in the growth rate of the population. Some examples of density-dependent regulation include competition for food among animals in a population, such as deer competing for access to limited food resources during the winter. Disease outbreaks in populations, such as when a virus spreads rapidly among a group of individuals living in close proximity. Predator-prey dynamics, where an increase in predator populations can lead to a decrease in prey populations and vice versa. Density-independent regulation. Density-independent regulation occurs when population growth rates are affected by external factors that are not related to the density of the population. These factors can include environmental conditions such as weather patterns, natural disasters, and habitat destruction. Density-independent factors affect populations in a similar way, regardless of their density. Some examples of density-independent regulation include droughts that lead to decreased water availability and reduced plant growth, which can have a cascading effect on other populations that depend on these plants for food and shelter. Forest fires that destroy large areas of habitat and disrupt ecosystems, leading to declines in populations of animals and plants. Climate change, which can alter environmental conditions and disrupt the balance of ecosystems, leading to changes in population size and distribution. Human regulation. Human regulation refers to the ways in which human activities can impact populations of other species. This can include habitat destruction, pollution, overhunting or overfishing, and introduction of non-native species. Human regulation can have a significant impact on populations and can lead to declines in species, loss of biodiversity, and ecosystem disruption. Examples of human regulation include habitat destruction caused by deforestation, urbanization, and agricultural activities. Pollution of air, water, and soil that can lead to ecosystem disruption and harm populations of plants and animals. Overhunting or overfishing of species that can lead to declines in population sizes and even extinction. Introduction of non-native species that can outcompete native species and disrupt the balance of ecosystems. The importance of understanding population regulation lies in its role in maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem functioning. By understanding the mechanisms that regulate population growth and size, conservation efforts can be directed towards maintaining healthy ecosystems and preventing species loss. In addition, understanding population regulation is important for managing populations of species that are of economic or ecological importance, such as game animals or pollinators. Life history strategies types, explanation in detail with multiple examples and importance. Life history strategies refer to the adaptive traits and trade-offs of an organism, which are determined by a combination of genetic and environmental factors. These traits are related to the reproductive characteristics of the organism and their lifespan. Here are the types of life history strategies. R-selected species. These species have a high reproductive rate, a short lifespan, and a small body size. They tend to produce large numbers of offspring, but provide little parental care. Examples of R-selected species include insects, weeds, and some fish. K-selected species. These species have a lower reproductive rate, a longer lifespan, and a larger body size. They produce fewer offspring, but invest more in parental care. Examples of K-selected species include humans, elephants, and whales. Some species. These species reproduce once in their lifetime, typically with a large number of offspring, and then die. Examples include some insects, salmon, and some plants. Idiroperous species. These species reproduce multiple times throughout their lifetime, with smaller numbers of offspring. Examples of they produce fewer K-selected species. These species have a lower reproductive rate, a longer lifespan, and a larger body size. They produce fewer offspring, but invest more in parental care. Examples of K-selected species include humans, elephants, and whales. Some species. These species reproduce once in their lifetime, typically with a large number of offspring, and then die. Examples include some insects, salmon, and some plants. Idiroperous species. These species reproduce multiple times throughout their lifetime, with smaller numbers of offspring. They tend to have longer lifespans and invest more in parental care. Examples include humans, elephants, and many birds. The importance of understanding life history strategies is that they provide insights into the adaptive traits and trade-offs that organisms make in response to environmental pressures. These strategies influence the survival and reproductive success of a species, and understanding them can help in the conservation and management of populations. For example, understanding the life history strategies of a particular species can help in predicting how it will respond to habitat destruction or other environmental changes. R and K selection in detail with multiple examples and importance. R and K selection are two contrasting reproductive strategies that are exhibited by different species in response to different environmental conditions. These strategies were originally proposed by the ecologists Robert MacArthur and E.O. Wilson in the early 1960s. R-selected species. R-selected species are those that prioritize high reproductive rates and rapid growth over survival in the face of environmental challenges. They tend to have a shorter lifespan, mature early, and produce a large number of offspring with little or no parental care. They thrive in unstable and unpredictable environments with high levels of disturbance, such as rapidly changing weather patterns, fire, or floods. Examples of R-selected species include insects, rodents, some plants, and most marine organisms. K-selected species. K-selected species, on the other hand, prioritize survival and growth over rapid reproduction. They tend to have a longer lifespan, mature later, and produce fewer offspring with higher levels of parental care. They thrive in stable environments with fewer disturbances, where competition for resources is high. Examples of K-selected species include large mammals like elephants, primates, and some birds. The importance of understanding R and K selection lies in their application to ecological management and conservation. For example, in conservation biology, understanding R and K selection can help in predicting the effects of environmental changes on populations of different species. It can also help in designing management plans that are appropriate for the different reproductive strategies. For example, R-selected species may require more frequent habitat restoration efforts to recover from disturbances, while K-selected species may require longer periods of undisturbed habitat to thrive. In conclusion, R and K selection are two contrasting reproductive strategies that are exhibited by different species in response to different environmental conditions. Understanding these strategies can provide insights into how different species respond to environmental changes, which can help in the management and conservation of populations. Teams and dispersal, types in detail with multiple examples and importance. Teams and dispersal are important concepts in population ecology that describe the movement and distribution of individuals within a population. Teams. A team is a small, local population of interbreeding individuals that are connected by gene flow. Teams can be considered as the building blocks of larger populations and are often used to study genetic diversity and the effects of local environmental conditions on population dynamics. Teams can be classified into two types. Closed teams. Closed teams are isolated populations that do not exchange. A team is a small, local population of interbreeding individuals that are connected by gene flow. Teams can be considered as the building blocks of larger populations and are often used to study genetic diversity and the effects of local environmental conditions on population dynamics. Teams can be classified into two types. Closed teams. Closed teams are isolated populations that do not exchange genes with other populations. They are often found on islands or in isolated habitats such as mountaintops or deserts. Examples of closed teams include the Galapagos finches and the lemurs of Madagascar. Open teams. Open teams are populations that exchange genes with other populations. These populations are connected by gene flow, which helps to maintain genetic diversity and prevent inbreeding. Examples of open teams include populations of migratory birds, fish, and mammals. Dispersal. Dispersal refers to the movement of individuals from one location to another. Dispersal is an important ecological process that helps to maintain genetic diversity, colonize new habitats, and avoid competition. Dispersal can be classified into two types. Active dispersal. Active dispersal occurs when individuals move under their own power, such as flying, swimming, or walking. Examples of animals that exhibit active dispersal include birds, fish, and mammals. Passive dispersal. Passive dispersal occurs when individuals are transported by external factors such as wind, water, or other organisms. Examples of animals that exhibit passive dispersal include seeds carried by the wind, larvae carried by ocean currents, and animals that hitchhike on the fur of other animals. The importance of understanding genes and dispersal lies in their application to conservation biology and habitat management. By studying the genetic structure and movement patterns of populations, ecologists can determine which areas are important for maintaining genetic diversity and which areas are critical for the survival of endangered species. This information can then be used to design conservation strategies that protect and restore these areas. In conclusion,